This is Outsiders Chapter 12, the last chapter. The hearing wasn't anything like I thought it would be. Besides Derry, Soda, and me, nobody was there except Randy and his parents and Sherry Valance, and her parents and a couple of other guys that had jumped Johnny and me that night. I don't know what I expected the whole thing to be like. I guess I've been watching too many Perry Mason shows, which is like a courtroom TV show that he would have been able to see in the 60s. Oh, yeah. The doctor who'd been coming to see me was there, and he had a long talk with the judge before the hearing. I didn't know what he had to do with it then, but I do now. First, Randy was questioned. He looked a little nervous, and I wish they'd let him have a cigarette. I wish they'd let me have a cigarette. I was a little more than shaky myself. Derry had told me to keep my mouth shut no matter what Randy and everybody said, that I would get my turn. All the Socs told the same story and stuck mainly to the truth, except they said that Johnny had killed Bob, but I figured I could straighten that point out when I got my turn. Cherry told them what had happened before and after Johnny and I had been jumped. I think I saw a couple of tears slide down her cheeks, but I'm not sure. Her voice was sure steady, even if she was crying. The judge questioned everyone carefully, but nothing real emotional or exciting happened like it does on TV. He asked Derry and Soda a little bit about Dally, I think to check our background and to find out what kind of guys we hung out with. Was he a real good buddy of ours? Derry said, Yes, sir, looking straight at the judge, not flinching. But Soda looked at me like he was sentencing me to the electric chair before he gave the same answer. I was real proud of both of them. Dally had been one of our gang, and we wouldn't desert him. I thought the judge would never get around to questioning me. Man, I was scared almost stiff by the time he did. And you know what? They didn't ask me a thing about Bob's getting killed. All the judge did was ask me if I liked living with Terry, if I liked school, what kind of grades I got, and stuff like that. I couldn't figure it out then, but later I found out what the doctor had been talking to the judge about. I guess I looked as scared as I really was, because the judge grinned at me and told me to quit chewing on my fingernails. It's a habit I have. Then he said I was acquitted and the whole case was closed, just like that. Didn't even give me a chance to talk much. But that didn't bother me a lot. I didn't feel like talking much anyway. I wish I could say that everything went back to normal, but it didn't, especially me. I started running into things like the door and kept tripping over the coffee table and losing things. I've always been kind of absent-minded, but man, then I was lucky if I got home from school with the right notebook and both shoes on. I walked all the way home once in my socks and didn't even notice until Steve made some bright remark about it. I guess I'd left my shoes in the locker room at school, but I never found them. Another thing was that I quit eating. I used to eat like a horse, but all of a sudden I wasn't hungry. Everything tasted like bologna. I was lossing up my homework too. I didn't do too badly in math because Derry checked over my homework in that and usually caught all my mistakes and made me do it again. But in English, I really washed out. English is like language arts. I used to get A's in English, mostly because our teacher made us do compositions all the time, which are longer writing pieces. I know I don't talk good English. Have you ever heard a hood that did? But I can write it good when I try. At least I could before. Now I was lucky to get a D on an essay. It bothered my English teacher, the way I was goofing up, I mean. He's a real good guy who makes us think, and you can tell he's interested in you as a person, too. One day he told me to stay in after the rest of the class left. Pony, I'd like to talk to you about your grades. Man, I wish I could beat it out of there. I knew I was flunking out in that class, but golly, I couldn't help it. There's not much to talk about, judging from your scores. Pony, I'll give it to you straight. You're failing this class right now. But taking into consideration the circumstances, if you come up with a good essay at the end of the semester, I'll pass you with a C grade. Taking into consideration the circumstances. Brother, was that ever a way to tell me that he knew I was goofing up because I'd been in a lot of trouble? At least that was a roundabout way of putting it. The first week of school after the hearing had been awful. People I knew wouldn't talk to me, and people I didn't know would come right up and talk about the whole mess, sometimes even teacher. And my history teacher, she acted as if she was scared of me, even though I've never caused any trouble in her class. You can bet that made me feel real good. Yes, sir, I said, I'll try. What's the essay supposed to be about? Anything you think is important enough to write about. It isn't a research essay. So I want it to be about your own ideas and your own experiences. Oh, my first trip to the zoo. I thought, oh boy, oh boy. Yes, sir, I said, and got out of there as fast as I could. At lunch hour, I met Two-Bit and Steve in the back parking lot. Hold on, I just need a drink. And we drove over to a little neighborhood grocery store to buy cigarettes and Cokes and candy bars. The store was a greaser hangout, and that was about all we ever had for lunch. The socials were causing a lot of trouble in the school cafeteria, throwing silverware and stuff, and everybody tried to blame it on us greasers. We all got a big laugh out of that. Greasers rarely even eat in the cafeteria. I was sitting on the fender of Steve's car, smoking and drinking a Pepsi, while he and Two-Bit were inside talking to some girls, when a car drove up and three socias got out. I just sat there looking at them and took another swallow of the Pepsi. I wasn't scared. It was the oddest feeling in the world. I didn't feel anything. Not scared or mad or anything. Just zero. You're the guy that killed Bob Sheldon, one of them said. He was a friend of ours. We don't like nobody killing our friends, especially greasers. Big deal, I thought. I busted the end off my Pepsi bottle and held onto the neck and tossed away my cigarette. You'll get back in your car or else you'll get split. The socials looked kind of surprised, and one of them backed up. I mean it, I said, hopping off the car. I've had about all I can take from you guys. I started toward them, holding the bottle the way Tim Shepard holds a switchblade, out and away from myself, in a loose but firm hold. I guess they knew I meant business because they got into their car and drove off. You really would have used that bottle, wouldn't you? Two-Bit had been watching from the doorway. Steve and me were backing you up, but I guess we didn't need to. You'd really have cut them up, huh? I guess so, I said with a sigh. I didn't see what Two-Bit was sweating about. Anyone else would have done the same thing, and Two-Bit wouldn't have thought twice about it. So let's pause here because this is an example of contrast and contradiction. At the beginning of the story, when Bob and Randy came up to Two-Bit and Ponyboy and Johnny because they were walking with Cherry and Marcia, Two-Bit gave Ponyboy a broken pop bottle, and he told Cherry like he never could have used it and all that stuff. And so this is a real contrast because now Ponyboy is doing something that he's done differently than he's done all along, and he's arming himself and kind of threatening other people, which is not like his character. So when that happens, you want to stop and ask, why is the character doing this? And then after you answer that, we'll move on. Ponyboy, listen, Two-Bit said, don't get tough. You're not like the rest of us, so don't try to be. What was the matter with Two-Bit? I knew as well as he did that if you got tough, you didn't get hurt. Get smart and nothing can touch you. Whose words are those? What in the world are you doing? Two-Bit's voice broke into my thoughts. I looked up at him. Picking up the glass? He stared at me for a second and then grinned. You little son of a gun, he said in a relieved voice. I didn't know what he was talking about, so I just went on picking up the glass from the bottle end to put it in the trash can. I didn't want anyone to get a flat tire. Two-Bit is glad that Ponyboy's picking up the glass because it shows that maybe he hasn't changed as much as he thought because he's still thinking about other people and trying to keep them safe. I tried to write that essay when I got home. I really did, mostly because Derry told me to or else. I thought about writing about my dad, but I couldn't. It's going to be a long time before I can even think about my parents. A long time. I tried writing about Soda's horse, Mickey Mouse, but I couldn't get it right. It always came out sounding corny. So I started writing names across the paper. Daryl Shane Curtis, Jr., Soda Patrick Curtis, Ponyboy Michael Curtis. Then I drew horses all over it. That was going to get a good grade like I'll get out. Hey, did the mail come in yet? Soda slammed the door and yelled for the mail, just the way he does every day when he comes home from work. I was in the bedroom, but I knew he would throw his jacket toward the sofa and miss, take off his shoes, and go into the kitchen for a glass of chocolate milk, because that's what he does every day of his life. He always runs around in his sock feet. He doesn't like shoes. Then he did a funny thing. He came in and flopped down on the bed and started smoking a cigarette. He hardly ever smokes, except when something is really bugging him or when he wants to look tough. And he doesn't have to impress us. We know he's tough. So I figured something was bothering him. How's work? Okay. Is something wrong? He shook his head. I shrugged and went back to drawing horses. Soda cooked dinner that night and everything came out right. That was unusual because he's always trying something different. One time we had green pancakes. Green. All I can tell you is, I can tell you one thing. If you've got a brother like Soda Pop, you're never bored. All through supper, Soda was quiet and he didn't eat much, which was also really unusual. Most of the time, you can't shut him up or fill him up. Derry didn't seem to notice, so I didn't say anything. Then after supper, me and Derry got into a fuss about the fourth one we'd had that week. This one started because I hadn't done anything for writing that essay, and I wanted to go for a ride. Used to be that I'd just stand there and let Derry yell at me, but lately I've been yelling right back. What's the sweat about my schoolwork? I finally shouted. I'll have to get a job as soon as I get out of school anyway. Look at Soda. He's doing okay, and he dropped out. You can just lay off. You are not going to drop out. Listen, with your brains and grades, you could get a scholarship, and we could put you through college. But schoolwork's not the point. You're living in a vacuum, Pony, and you're going to have to cut it out. Johnny and Dallas were our buddies, too. But you don't just stop living because you lose someone. I thought you knew that by now. And you don't quit. Anytime you don't like the way I'm running things, you can get out. So this is an example of words of the wiser. That's when a character tells the main character some advice. So Derry said, "You don't stop living because you lose someone. I thought you knew that by now." Then you stop and ask, what is the life lesson and how might that affect the character? Let me just move my picture out of the way. So this the life lesson is pretty clear. You don't stop living because you lose someone. I thought you knew that by now. So take time to think about how this advice might affect Ponyboy, and then we'll keep reading. I went tight and cold. We never talk about Dallas or Johnny. You'd like that, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you? You'd like me to just get out. Well, it's not that easy, is it, Soda? But when I looked at Soda, I stopped. Oh, sorry. I wanted to switch. Oh, sorry. There. There, we can switch the screen. Okay. But when I looked at Soda, I stopped. His face was white, and when he looked at me, his eyes were wide with a pained expression. I suddenly remembered Curly Shepherd's face when he slipped off a telephone pole and broke his arm. Soda's face looked like that. Don't. Oh, you guys, why can't you? Soda jumped up suddenly and bolted out the door. Derry and I were struck dumb. Derry picked up the envelope that Soda had dropped. It's a letter he wrote Sandy, Derry said without expression. She returned it without even opening it. So that's what had been bugging Soda all afternoon. And I hadn't even bothered to find out. While I was thinking about it, I realized I never paid much attention to Soda's problems. Derry and I just took it for granted that he didn't have any. Ponyboy, when Sandy went to Florida, it wasn't Soda, Ponyboy. He wasn't the father of her child. He told me that he loved her, but I guess she didn't love him like he thought she did, because it just wasn't his. You don't have to draw me a picture, I said. He wanted to marry her anyway, but she just left. Derry was looking at me with a puzzled expression. Why didn't he tell you? I didn't think he'd tell Steve or Tubit, but I thought he told you everything. Maybe he tried, I said. How many times had Soda started to tell me something only to find that I was daydreaming or stuck in a book? He always listened to me, no matter what he was doing. He cried every night the week you were gone, Derry said slowly. Both you and Sandy gone in the same week. He put the envelope down. Come on, let's go after him. We chased Soda clear to the park. We were gaining on him, but he had a block's head start. Circle around and cut him off, Derry ordered. Even out of condition, I was still the best runner in the family. I'll stay right behind him. I headed through the trees and cut Soda off halfway across the park. He reared off to the right, but I caught him in a flying tackle before he'd gone more than a couple steps. It knocked the wind out of both of us. We lay there gasping for a minute or two, and then Soda sat up and brushed the grass off his shirt. You should have gone for football instead of track. Where did you think you were going? I lay flat on my back and looked up at him. Derry came up and dropped down beside us. Soda shrugged. I don't know. It's just, I can't stand to hear y'all fight. Sometimes I just have to get out, or it's like I'm in the middle of a tug of war and I'm being split in half. You dig? Derry gave me a startled look. Neither of us had realized what it was doing to Soda to hear us fight. So this is an aha moment. They finally realize that they're fighting. Both Derry and Ponyboy realize this, that their fighting affects more than just them. It affects Soda Pop. And then you're going to stop and ask, how might this change things? So you can answer this question for now that Ponyboy and Derry have realized that their fighting affects Soda, how might this realization affect Derry, Soda, or Pony? And then we'll keep reading. I was sick and cold with shame. What he said was the truth. Derry and I did play tug of war with him, with ever a thought to how much it was hurting him. Soda was fiddling with some dead grass. I mean, I can't take sides. It would be a lot easier if I could, but I see both sides. Derry yells too much and tries too hard and takes everything too seriously. And Ponyboy, you don't think enough. You don't realize that all Derry's giving up just to give you the chance he missed out on. He could have stuck you in a home somewhere and worked his way through college. Ponyboy, I'm telling you the truth. I dropped out because I didn't like school. I did try in school, but you saw my grades. Look, I'm happy working in a gas station, but you'd never be happy doing something like that. And Derry, you ought to try to understand him more. Quit bugging him about every little mistake he makes. He feels things differently than you. He gave us a pleading look. Golly, you two, it's bad enough having to listen to it, but when you start trying to get me to take sides. Tears welled up in Soda's eyes. We're all we have left. We ought to be able to stick together against everything. If we don't have each other, we don't have anything. If you don't have anything, you end up like Dally. And I don't mean dead either. I mean like he was before. And that's worse than dead. Please, he wiped his eyes on his arm, don't fight anymore. Derry looked real worried. I suddenly realized that Derry was only 20, that he wasn't so much older that he couldn't feel scared or hurt or lost as the rest of us. I saw that I'd expected Derry to do all the understanding without even trying to understand him. And he had given up a lot for Soda and me. Sure, little buddy, Derry said softly. We're not going to fight anymore. Hey, Pony. Soda gave me a tearful grin. Don't you start crying, too. One ball baby in the family's enough. I'm not crying, I said. Maybe I was. I don't remember. Soda gave me a playful punch on the shoulder. No more fights, okay, Pony Boy? Derry said. Okay, I said. And I meant it. Derry and I would probably still have misunderstandings. We were too different not to, but no more fights. We couldn't do anything to hurt Soda. Soda Pop would always be the middleman, but it didn't mean that he had to keep getting pulled apart. Instead of Derry and me pulling apart, he'd be pulling us together. Well, Soda said, I'm cold. How about going home? Race you, I challenged, leaping up. It was a really nice night for the race. The air was clear and cold, and so clean it almost sparkled. The moon wasn't out, but the stars lit up everything. It was quiet except for the sound of our feet on the cement and the dry, scraping sound of leaves blowing across the street. It was a real nice night. I guess I was still out of shape because we all three tied. Well, maybe we just all wanted to just stay together. I still didn't want to do my homework that night, though. I hunted around for a book to read, but I read everything in the house about 50 million times, even Derry's copy of The Carpetbagger, although he told me I wasn't old enough to read it. So this is The Carpetbaggers, which is kind of like a steamy romance. Finally, I picked up Gone with the Wind and looked at it for a long time. I knew Johnny was dead. I had known it all the time, even when I was sick and pretending that he wasn't. It was Johnny, not me, who had killed Bob. I knew that too. I just thought that maybe if I pretended like Johnny wasn't dead, it wouldn't hurt so much. The way Two-Bit, after the police had taken Dally's body away, had griped because he had lost his switchblade when they had searched Dally. It wasn't his switchblade that he was sad about. But it still hurt anyway. You know a guy a long time, and I mean you really know him, and you don't get used to the idea that he's dead overnight. Johnny was something more than a buddy to all of us. I guess he had listened to more beefs and more problems from more people than any of us. A guy that'll really listen to you, really listen and care about what you're saying, is something rare. And I couldn't forget him telling me that he hadn't done enough, that he hadn't been out of his neighborhood his whole life, and then it was too late. I took a deep breath and opened the book. A slip of paper fell out on the floor, and I picked it up. Ponyboy, I asked the nurse to give you this book so that you could finish it. It was Johnny's handwriting. I went on reading, almost hearing Johnny's quiet voice. The doctor came in a while ago, but I knew anyway. I keep getting tireder and tireder. Listen, I don't mind dying now. It's worth it. It's worth saving those kids. Their lives are worth more than mine. They have more to live for. Some of their parents came by to thank me, and I know it was worth it. Tell Dally it's worth it. I'm just going to miss you guys. I've been thinking about it, and that poem, the guy that wrote it, he meant you're gold when you're a kid, like green. When you're a kid, everything's new like dawn. It's just when you get used to everything that it's day. Like the way you dig sunsets, Pony. That's gold. Keep it that way. It's a good way to be. I want you to tell Dally to look at a sunset. He'll probably think that you're crazy, but ask for me. I don't think he's ever really seen a sunset. And don't be so bugged over being a greaser. You still have a lot of time to make something of yourself. Be what you want. There's still lots of good in the world. Tell Dally. I don't think he knows. Your buddy, Johnny. Tell Dally? It was too late to tell Dally. Would Dally have even listened? I doubted it. Suddenly, it wasn't only a personal thing to me. I could picture hundreds and hundreds of boys living on the wrong sides of cities, boys with black eyes who jumped at their own shadows, hundreds of boys who maybe watched sunsets and looked at stars and ached for something better. I could see boys going down under streetlights because they were mean and tough and hated the world, and it was too late to tell them that they were still good in it, and they wouldn't believe you if you did. It was too big of a problem to be just a personal thing for me. There should be some help. Someone should tell them before it was too late. Someone should tell their side of the story, and maybe people would understand them and wouldn't be so quick to judge a boy by the amount of hair oil he wore. It was important to me. I picked up the phone book and looked up my English teacher's phone number. Mr. Syme, this is Ponyboy. That essay, how long can it be? No less than 5 pages. He sounded a little surprised. I'd forgotten it was a little late at night to be calling. Can it be longer? Certainly, Ponyboy, as long as you want. Thanks, I said, and hung up. I sat down and picked up my pen and thought for a minute, remembering a handsome, dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper. A tough, tow-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth and a bitter grin on his hard face. Remembering, and this time it didn't hurt, a quiet, defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting badly and who had black eyes with a frightened expression in them. 1 week had taken all three of them. And I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. I wondered for a long time how to start that essay, how to start writing about something that was that important to me. And finally I began with this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. The end.